This is Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org here in Portland, Oregon, and today I am joined by half goblin, and half Asian man, mixed race, Tim Pool of course, Timcast. And of course, we're going to be talking about the very controversial New York Times editorial hire, as well as race and politics. Now, me and you have been traveling all over the place, covering issues about poverty, inequality, war, and everyone in the United States seems to be dominated with outrage mobs, identity politics, and a lot of the other issues that are affecting a lot of the world in very severe ways are kind of being shrugged under the rug. What is happening here, and why is this kind of race politics dominating our discourse?
I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think it's worth pointing out that during Occupy Wall Street, the conversation was the powerful elites, the big banks, the corruption of our economic system, the financial crisis. And at the beginning of Occupy, I don't know if you remember, but there were old conservatives down there, libertarian Ron Paul supporters with the far left, because they both said, we agree, these big banks, this elitism is a problem. And then all of a sudden, a group of people came in and started making everything about race. They started separating the people based on their, race, gender identity. They had the people of color caucus, the women's caucus, then another women's caucus for trans women because one didn't want them. And then all of a sudden, the conversation shifted from we need to, be concerned about what the powerful elites are doing with war and drone strikes, and it became you're white or you're black, and therefore you're the problem. And now all of a sudden, you actually have people more interested in fighting each other in the streets over who is the wrong group, who is the wrong color, who is the wrong identity, and ignoring the powerful elites who are, we've had a missile strike in Syria, we've had commando raids in Yemen, and that's not even in the conversation anymore.
Yeah. I mean, there could be many conspiracy theories, but it is worth kind of elaborating because I was there during Occupy Wall Street. There's many people from all different political spectrums. A lot of people who are, against the Federal Reserve, against the kind of inequality that's happening here, their corporate and government stealing of wealth from the people. And then, tranquilly, it changed to those same people who were at that very same park fighting each other. Even here in Portland yesterday, I saw people from both sides that I saw at Occupy Wall Street, and they're on opposing sides. So there is something to say about the effectiveness, about this divide and conquer that has been happening and the bigger fighting that is erupted between people. Instead of focusing on large institutions and larger problems, they're like, now we're going to hate each other because of our basic differences. And that is definitely highlighted with what's happening right now with the New York Times editorial hire, Sarah Jeong, and the whole race issue that's being discussed there. How do you see this whole thing unfolding for the people who haven't been following it? Because again, I don't talk about race and politics. You do on your channel. Yeah. What the hell happened, and how is this unfolding in the bigger national discourse?
I mean, I don't know how it happened. It happened. And now you've got this woman from the New York Times. She's racist. I mean, that's not just my opinion. It is my opinion, but the New York Daily News called her racist. The BBC initially called her racist and then stealth-edited the article later. The New York Times went and edited an old article about Roseanne where they're critical of racism because now that they're supporting... Here, I'll put it this way. The New York Times defended Sarah Jeong. She made thousands of racist tweets. And on an old article written in the New York Times, they said something to the effect of, when you let racism slide, we all lose. The New York Times removed that from the article. And the only reason I can imagine, I don't know why they did it, but my personal opinion is that they removed it because they did support racism. So now that, most people agree what Sarah Jeong said, she called white people groveling goblins. Come on, that's racist. The whole idea of this institutional power structure stuff is absurd, and it's not the real definition of racism. If you think a race is inferior, if you antagonize or discriminate, you're a racist. And now we have this weird paradox happening because, for one, the New York Times basically, by removing that line from the Roseanne article, I feel like they've admitted it. But now you have there's a comedian who was on Water's World on Fox News who called her Ling Ling and made references to her eating fortune cookies. And on the left is now saying that's racist. But hold on, the comedian's black. So a week ago, the left was saying you can't be racist towards people above you in the power structure because racism is prejudice plus power. And then when a black man says she's Ling Ling, they say he's racist. Whoa, but your definition just changed from a week out. I don't understand. If this is a black man and you believe that Asians have more institutional power than they do, he certainly can't be racist towards her, but it gets even worse. The New York Times said that Sarah Jeong wasn't being racist because she was trolling back at people. People were racist to her, so she responded with their own language to counter-troll. Okay, well, in response to her being racist, this black comedian made comments at her. I think that was his point. And they're still calling it racist. So by two measures, they have contradicted themselves in 1 week. Look, If you're going to insult, antagonize, attack anybody for what their race is, I don't care. You're racist. And then, look, the comedian on Fox News who made racist comments, I think those comments were racist. Do I care? Not necessarily. He's a comedian. I understand what he's trying to do. And I'm Korean. When he called her Ling Ling and made reference, because she's Korean too, I laughed. And I get it. I don't think the guy hates me for being Korean. I don't think he hates her for being Korean. I think he was trying to make a point about how she's racist, and I understand it.
Yeah. As George Carlin says, context matters. And it doesn't really matter for a lot of people since they're obviously just waiting for the next outrage mob to galvanize the different crowds against each other for political brownie points, which it just keeps happening more and more, and it's becoming more outrageous. And there's a lot of levels of hypocrisy, whether it's Roseanne Barr compared to this New York Times editorial hire, whether it's people like Tara Strong that you brought up that also is rallying against racism, but also has racist content that she has produced as well. So there's so much hypocrisy in all of this, and it seems like people are just shooting themselves in the foot and really not going anywhere.
So I've actually been a big fan of Tara Strong. She follows me on Twitter. I met her a while ago at an award ceremony, and I think she's one of the best voice actresses of this generation, probably of all time. But she's been on Twitter very, very anti-Trump and anti-racist and all that stuff. And more power to you. I said to her, I really respect hearing your opinion and your thoughts on all this stuff, and I still do. But there's an issue when you're going to complain about racism. And she was a voice actress for several characters on a show called Drawn Together, where they mocked Asians using every racial stereotype in the book. So, look, defend the right to be offensive and make racist jokes, by all means. Just be consistent. If you're going to come out and say, these people are racist, the people at Patriot Prayer are racist, and I don't support racism, and then you're going to have the left saying things like James Gunn shouldn't be fired for these offensive jokes, okay, no problem. Just don't complain about people making racist jokes and then backpedal as soon as it's your side that's being called out for racist jokes, especially when, I don't want to say that Tara Strong necessarily disagrees with offensive comedy, but the things she said as her character about, she called Mexicans useless. She made reference to black people not being people. Like they draw that distinction in the show. Her character's overtly racist, and she actually has an episode where she puts on a Chinese hat with computer buttons all over it, and then arms come down and pulls her eyes squinty. And then she calls a cat beef and broccoli. She says Chinese people now all of a sudden look different. Like, it's really offensive and it's super racist. So if you're going to produce kind of like that, you better stand up for the rights of others to be offensive and to say the same thing.
Exactly, and they never do because it's like gang politics. It's all tribal warfare, and we're seeing a lot of level of hypocrisies. Now, I think it's fair to say that a lot of this was initiated by the left, but now there's a big discussion because the right is kind of using very similar techniques and tactics of the right, and some people are saying, well, no, the right should never stoop to their level and continue this cycle because they're only making it worse, and some people are saying, yes, use their own weapons against them as effectively as you can since they're using it against us.
I disagree to a certain extent. There was a study that came out, and it was Slate that reported on this, like of all places, Slate, far left, that said Trump's main base, those who got him elected, are not on the internet. They watch Fox News. So when I think about who the left and the right are, who voted for Trump and who hates Trump, it's not Twitter. The conservatives we think about on Twitter, I actually think are more like center-right and moderate. And it's not an issue of the left versus the right. It's an issue of the regressive, like far-left communist, socialist, who are willing to bend the rules and lie about whatever in order to get what they want, versus moderates on the left and the right. There are a lot of people who follow me who aren't Trump supporters, who think they are on the right, and then I told them to do a political compass test, and then they turns out they're center-left or center, and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So what it really comes down to, in my opinion, is communists want to break down all these social structures and rebuild it. They want everyone to be equal. Well, the only way that's possible is if you remove physical differences between people. Because, look, if someone's taller and someone's shorter, there's advantages and disadvantages right there. They have to do something about that. So what do? They will lie, cheat, and steal. They will say, you're racist, you can't do that. And then everyone will... So let's say they want to gain some power, get someone fired. They'll say, that person's racist, fire them. They will. Then when someone calls out them for being racist, they'll say, oh, no, I can't be racist because of institutional racism, because the only goal is to make sure they maintain power within institutions so they can continue to amass power, and they have no principles.
Yeah. No principles, no morals. It's all about just gaining more power and authority for themselves, which is sadly dominating our culture, and people are playing into it. And to me, this is a cycle that's not worth repeating, and it's only going to get more out of hand, and people are getting caught up, and it's like me and you. We took the political compass test. We're pretty much bottom center. You're a little bit to the left. I'm a little bit to the right, almost on the exact same point down the middle of the whole bottom part. But yet again, yesterday I was called scum and alt-right here by random people. You're being called a racist all the time.
So I'm walking through the park.
Yeah.
The police said to the people on the west side, that's Antifa, you must leave the park to the west. Weapons have been spotted. They didn't. They walked north. So I'm streaming. I said the police just gave a warning telling the protesters to go to the west. They went to the north and disobeyed the police order. And then all of a sudden some guy yells, "F you, you fascist." And I was like, what? Why are you calling me a fascist? And he says, they didn't defy the police order. I'm like, they literally did. The police just said it. And he was like, yeah, well, they don't have to. They can do whatever they want. I'm like, that's not what I said. I didn't say they couldn't. I'm just telling people what the cops just said. And he's like, F you, fascist.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's like, I don't like authority. I don't like anyone over anybody else. I'm like at major anarchist conferences. I like some of the philosophies. If there's any that I kind of entertain and espouse, it's definitely anarchism. But like free anarchism where there's no harm done, where people have the right to decide how they want to live in their smaller, decentralized communities, whether it's communism, socialism, capitalism, whatever you guys want. But decentralization of power is pretty much my main philosophical principle. But yet still they're trying to let me in with you're all right, or even some of the people on the right. Rarely, but it does happen. Oh, you're damn never Trumper lefty. Yeah. We're none of that. I know my principles. Tim espouses his principles on his YouTube channel that you can check out. And any last words on this crazy identity politics, race politics that's dominating the headlines now?
You know, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say it's all on purpose. Because getting people like Anne Hathaway, who's a probably multimillionaire white woman, to tell, white people can never experience this kind of threats and violence, and then this ends up with people fighting each other in the streets, to me that's like the wealthy elites telling the peasants to beat each other while they, live in their fancy mansion sipping their wine. And it's kind of worrisome to me, in a sense, during Occupy, how close it was to the left and the right coming together over these issues of toppling the big power structures.
Inequality.
Yep. And now it's shifted to the two poor people, the poor white man and the poor black man, yelling at each other.
Yeah. You're definitely right. Thank you so much for your commentary, Tim. And thank you, beautiful and amazing human beings who are enabling this content with, of course, your support, with your viewership, with voting, not only with your dollar, but with your clicks. Without you, my job, Tim's job, wouldn't be possible. And that's why I love you guys. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more.